In the winter of 1798, when Maine was still a rugged district claimed by Massachusetts, and the Atlantic winds carried the scent of salt and pine through nearly untouched wilderness, 3 women arrived in the coastal settlement of Greyhaven. They claimed to be women of God. For more than 3 decades, they would operate what appeared to be a sanctuary of prayer and redemption. By the time their doors finally closed, more than 600 women had entered its stone walls. Less than half returned home, and those who did were never the same. The townspeople of Greyhaven remembered the morning clearly. A gray October sky hung low over the harbor as a heavy wagon rolled into town, its wheels groaning beneath the weight of wooden crates stamped with foreign markings. At its front stood a tall woman in her early 40s who called herself Mother Helena Vale. Her bearing was aristocratic, her posture rigid, her voice carrying the cultivated tones of London society. Silver threaded through her dark hair, and her pale gray eyes seemed to measure the town in a single glance, as if cataloging every weakness. Beside her stood Sister Marjorie Vale, thin and deliberate in movement, her hands unnervingly steady. She spoke rarely, and when she did, her words carried the faint trace of Edinburgh. The youngest, Sister Lucinda Vale, was striking in appearance. Barely 23, she possessed dark hair and sharp features that drew attention instantly. Yet there was something cold in her gaze, something analytical. She studied people not as neighbors, but as subjects. They claimed to be Anglican nuns fleeing religious persecution in England. They presented letters of recommendation, convincing, embossed, official. No one in Greyhaven knew those letters were masterful forgeries. 15 miles inland, beyond logging paths and hunting trails, the Vale sisters purchased nearly 200 acres of wilderness from a struggling widow. They paid 3 times its value. Construction began immediately. The structure that rose from the forest was unlike any church building the region had ever seen. 3 stories of gray coastal stone, windows placed high and narrow, doors reinforced with iron braces, and beneath it, a basement requiring excavation far deeper than necessary for storage. When questioned, Mother Helena smiled gently. Spiritual purification, she explained, requires complete separation from worldly distraction. The explanation satisfied most, but the building looked less like a convent and more like a citadel.
The sisters quickly gained the support of Dr. Elias Whitcomb, a frontier physician known for progressive ideas. Whitcomb was fascinated by their knowledge of what was then called feminine hysteria, melancholia, and moral instability. Their discussions were filled with references to European anatomical theories and emerging neurological studies. Privately, Whitcomb agreed to refer patients to their institution in exchange for access to detailed case documentation and generous financial compensation. It was a partnership born of ambition and greed. At first, the women who arrived were local. Unmarried mothers, daughters who refused arranged marriages, wives who publicly challenged their husbands, women who read too much, spoke too loudly, questioned too boldly. They entered seeking correction, or were sent against their will. The fees were steep: $20 silver for 1 month, 100 for complete reformation. The promise was simple: transformation, and transformation was delivered, but not in the way families imagined. In February 1803, a young trapper named Caleb Turner heard something no man could mistake. He had been tracking a wounded deer when the wind shifted, carrying with it a sound that did not belong to nature. A scream, not of fear, of agony, drawn out, raw, human. The convent's windows were dark, but a faint orange glow pulsed from the basement level. Caleb crept closer, pressing against frost-covered stone. Through a narrow window, he saw a scene that would haunt him forever. A woman strapped to a wooden table, her head secured by metal clamps, her scalp partially shaved, and beneath the oil lamp's flickering light, an opening in her skull. Sister Marjorie stood over her, guiding a thin metal instrument into exposed brain tissue with the calm precision of a jeweler. Mother Helena observed nearby, recording notes. Lucinda passed instruments. The screaming rose, then stopped. The work continued, methodical, clinical, detached. Caleb fled into the storm.
His account was dismissed as hysteria. The sisters explained the sounds as spiritual cleansing, demonic resistance. Few questioned further. Yet something began to change. Women who returned from the convent were altered. Clara Bennett, once outspoken and defiant, returned compliant and expressionless. She accepted marriage without hesitation. She no longer laughed. She no longer read. She bore faint scars beneath her hair. She remembered nothing of her stay. Another woman, grieving the death of her child, returned claiming she had never given birth. Memories erased, personalities flattened, emotions dulled to near absence. Dr. Whitcomb praised the sisters' success, but unease spread quietly. Behind stone walls, the truth was far darker. Mother Helena Vale was not a nun. She was Dr. Helena Varon, formerly expelled from a Scottish medical academy for unauthorized cranial experimentation. Marjorie and Lucinda were her collaborators. They had come to America for one reason: freedom from oversight. In the basement chambers, they conducted early forms of trepanation and targeted brain injury, believing specific regions controlled memory, emotion, obedience, and defiance. They mapped skulls, measured responses, recorded personality changes with scientific precision. Patients were sedated but kept conscious. The sisters asked questions during procedures, observed changes in real time. They were not driven by religion. They were driven by knowledge, at any cost. Their documentation did not remain in Maine. Letters traveled to Vienna, Paris, and Edinburgh. Universities paid handsomely for their findings. Techniques for memory suppression, emotional dampening, behavioral compliance. The convent became a research outpost disguised as sanctuary. By 1815, more than 400 women had passed through their hands. Nearly 200 were recorded as expired. Bodies preserved in alcohol-lined chambers, brains labeled and catalogued. A private archive of human suffering.
In 1819, a woman arrived who would change everything. Her name was Isabel Whitford. She had borne a child out of wedlock and refused to name the father. Her wealthy family declared her unstable and sent her away. But Isabel was educated. She recognized symptoms in other women: speech impairment, memory gaps, cognitive decline. She understood what scalp scars meant. When the sisters prepared her for intensive treatment, Isabel resisted. She endured isolation, starvation, psychological torment, and she observed. She mapped routines,
memorized corridors. During a violent spring storm that flooded the lower chambers, she found her opportunity. She descended into the basement and saw everything. Operating tables, instruments, jars containing preserved brain tissue, correspondence proving international sale of experimental data. She stole documents, then fled into the wilderness. For 3 days, Isabel ran, pursued by hired search parties, starving, freezing. On the 3rd morning, she encountered a trapper who believed her story. Sheriff Nathaniel Crowe initially dismissed her as delusional until he read the documents. Within days, a raid was organized, but the sisters had already vanished. The convent stood empty. What investigators found inside would scar them for life. 47 preserved bodies hidden behind a false wall, hundreds of labeled specimens, detailed surgical journals, financial records showing payments from European institutions, more than 600 names catalogued, 200 marked deceased. Dr. Elias Whitcomb confessed his involvement before losing his sanity. The true identities of the sisters were revealed. International warrants were issued. They were never captured. Rumors placed them in Canada, Argentina, Paris, always vanishing before arrest. The convent was burned to the ground, official records sealed for generations. Families chose silence to protect reputations, and medical institutions quietly absorbed the knowledge gained from horror. Isabel Whitford spent the rest of her life haunted by what she witnessed. Her memoir, discovered decades later in state archives, detailed the crimes in chilling precision. The convent in the Pines became a footnote in official history, but its implications remain unsettling. 3 educated women exploited faith, science, and social prejudice to conduct decades of systematic human experimentation, not in secret caves, not in foreign prisons, but in early America, behind stone walls built in the name of God. History often remembers progress. It rarely remembers the price. And sometimes, the most terrifying monsters wear the calmest smiles.